Okay, so here's a video that I've been asked to make for a while by a few people. And my wife is very much allergic to mosquitoes, much more so than I am. I get bit by one of those things, it itches for a little while and goes away. My wife gets bit by them and she welts up for days, which, being down here in the swamps of southern Louisiana, makes for some pretty miserable sitting outside on the porch or wherever the heck we might be, because the mosquitoes are probably rivaled only by those I've heard about that live in Alaska. So we have found that these Thermacells that you can buy with the little butane cartridges and the pads are pretty darn effective at keeping those little critters away from my wife. But if, as anybody who uses these things knows, the replacement cartridges, they're proud of those bad boys. And so before I went to the poorhouse, I had to figure out a way to do something about that, because we like using these, but I don't like paying full price for this stuff. So here's a method I've found to refill these containers, and you can do, once you've got it set up, you can do it multiple times and they will work for a long time. So here's what you do. I don't happen to have a new one right now, but this is one of the ones I've reused, and I'm going to show you the whole process. First thing you have to do is pull this nipple out. You want to do this, make sure it's kind of empty, because it could spit at you. There. So you can see there's some ribs on that, and that's what bites into the plastic. Now if you look down in there, on this one here you don't see anything, but on one that's new, there will be another piece of brass looking stuff down in there, and that's a check valve. What you do, you get yourself a nice sharp pointed screw like this. You put it in there and screw it in until it grabs the check valve, and you hear the check valve squeak or spin. And you grab this in the same manner, you pull that little check valve out, and it's about half the size of that and smaller in diameter. And then you throw that, unscrew that, throw the check valve away. Then what you do, you put this, hear those 3 clicks, you're done. Now that is a refillable cartridge. Now the next step is where it takes a little bit of art. So that's what's coming up next. So the next step is to create the spigot that you need to refill it. You get yourself one of these big cans of butane, universal lighter fluid. I get this stuff on Amazon. It's pretty cheap. You can get it at Walmart, but it's probably not as cheap. And they got a bunch of different nozzles on here. All the ones are numbered. I think it's a number 5, so let's check. I think it's a number 5. You gotta get it out of there. There, that's the number 5. It doesn't quite fit as smoothly as I'd like. You need it to really fit smooth in there. So I need one a little bit smaller than that. Now that's the number 1. You can see how it pushes in and it activates the check valve. But what's going to happen here is a couple of things. First, this check valve is square, and it bleeds or dispenses around the circumference of it. So if I use this flat nozzle, yeah, it'll open it up, but what it'll do is, since you're pushing this flat end down into the flat piece of that check valve, it's just going to block the flow, and you're not going to get anywhere. Plus, since this isn't a nice snug fit with this, it's not going to seal, and even if it did flow, it'd just blow right out at you. So what you end up having to do, if you can see that little bit of a gap there between the step between those two, is you've got to trim off just enough where when you push that thing in, that seals with the outer edge of this piece of this valve. So that's what we're going to do now. But you still remember, you have to have enough to be able to activate that valve like this. So we're going to trim that just a little bit. It's a little bit of a trial and error game here. Come here. Yeah, I know, I'm cutting on the table. What are you going to do? So now, still pushes it down, but that may be a good enough fit. Now we still have the problem of this sealing off because it's pushed up against the same square surface. So what I've found is if I take the razor blade and cut just a barest notch, a little V notch in that, just enough so that it opens it up on the sides, it will allow it to breathe. And that, hopefully, like I said, this can take a few times to get it right. That will hopefully allow us to refill this. So the next step is to try to refill it. So we got our makeshift nozzle on there. Put her in there. You can see she is flowing. Kind of slow though. So I'm going to open up my little notch a little bit. A little bit more aggressive. See how she does. Sometimes you got to bleed these a little bit to get the air out of them. A couple of times. When you see it boil like that, that's a good sign. That means you got the air out and the vapor pressure is where it'll be usable. And there you go. And now this canister is set to where you can refill it. The next time you don't have to you don't have to pull anything. You don't even have to pull that out. Once the check valve's gone, it's gone. And now that you got your nozzle made here, you can still do a little bit of fine tuning on that. But that is how you refill one of these little cartridges. Now, obviously, I'm making no bones about how your ability is to do this. You're certainly working with flammables. I don't personally recommend this practice. I do it because I'm capable, but I accept full responsibility for what it may do. There is obviously no warranty express or implied as far as how this is going to function in your machine at any time that you do it. And I'm sure that the company that makes these would never recommend this process. But I've been successful with it for well over a couple of years now. Never had any issues with it. They burn just fine. And that's how I do it. So, thanks very much for watching.